You're listening to episode 50 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the podcast and website for modern, secular application of early Buddhist thought. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the companion website has show notes for each episode, along with resource materials on Buddhism, critical thinking, science, secularism, and skeptical thought. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Dr. Sara Lazar of Massachusetts General Hospital joins us to speak about a new study on the effects of meditation on brain density. Often when we tell people, particularly other skeptics, about how beneficial meditation is to us, we're met with, well, skepticism. And that's okay. People should feel free to question with confidence and ask for evidence for claims that are made. That's one reason seeing good scientific studies with appropriate controls and blinds published in legitimate peer-reviewed journals is wonderful. It can't be said enough. It's one thing to have a study published. It's quite another to have a study with controls in place to ensure accurate measurement, blinds in place to ensure confirmation bias is addressed, and a journal that is validated by the scientific community review the study in question. Best of all, and perhaps more rare, are studies which also make their way to mainstream media and become wildly popular. This not only gives those of us who have personal experience and external validation of the efficacy of a practice, but helps draw others who may also benefit from starting a practice. Sara Lazar got her PhD from Harvard University in 1996. She is currently an instructor in psychiatry at Harvard, is a scientist with the Mind-Body Medical Institute at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and is part of the Psychiatric Neuroimaging Research Program at Massachusetts General Hospital. She is active with yoga and has been practicing Vipassana meditation since 1997. So sit back, relax, and have a nice medium latte, I think, tonight. Caribou coffee, of course. And I'm here with Sara Lazar. Sara, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what I wanted to chat about today is a study that recently came out and your involvement with it. So if you would please tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role was in the study.
Right. So I'm a neuroscientist at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. And I started practicing yoga and meditation about 15 years ago. And at the time I was in graduate school. And as I finished up my PhD, I was just, completely enamored with my yoga and meditation practice. And just the question that kept coming up in my mind was, is what I'm experiencing real? What's really going on? And I just really wanted to understand it from a scientific perspective, not just from a practice perspective. And I just thought it'd be really wonderful to to study and to research. So, I was very lucky. I found some people who were willing to train me and, in neuroimaging. And so I started working on this project, and it is 100% what I do is study the brains of people who meditate.
Awesome. What a great job. How many of us listening would like to say, what do I do for a living? I study brains of meditators. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's really exciting. And it's a cool topic. It's a great conversation starter. It's a great conversation starter at parties. Yeah.
Article itself was called Mindfulness Practice Leads to Increase in Regional Brain Gray Matter Density. Tell us about how you started that particular study.
So the first study we did was we looked at long-term meditation practitioners compared to controls. I was doing another study and with imaging with meditators. And around that time, the tool became available to look at brain structure. So you've all seen pictures of brains that have spots on them, and usually the spots represent where in the brain is active during a task. But a tool became available to study structure, so how much gray matter and white matter brains had. And it occurred to me, because with meditation practice, it's not just while you're sitting and practicing. It really changes, how you interact with the world throughout the rest of the day. And it really has a really profound effect on all aspects of how you function the day. So to me, that screams neuroplasticity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so there had been a study with people who juggle. And they got people who had never juggled before, and they scanned them. They taught them how to juggle for 3 months, and then they scanned them again. And they found that part of their brain grew as a result of juggling practice. And so I had these brains of long-term meditation practitioners who had been practicing for 20, 30 years. And I thought, oh, well, if they can see changes after, 3 months of juggling, I wonder what's, there'd be a difference in these long-term meditators. So compared long-term meditators to the controls, and lo and behold, there was a difference. But, of course, the critics said, well, meditators, they're just weird. And the brains were like that before they practiced. And, of course, the first study couldn't address that. So we really felt it was important to get people who had never practiced meditation before and to scan them, and then to teach them how to meditate for a few months, and then scan them again. And as you all may know, there's something called mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was started by Jon Kabat-Zinn about 30 years ago, and it's an 8-week program that's based on Buddhist meditation. And it's really wonderful. It's really taken off in the scientific community as a way to study meditation-naive individuals, because it's a standard 8-week class, and sort of everyone, it's well documented of what happens. There's a lot of research around it. So we decided to scan people before and after this 8-week class. And so that's what this new study is we scanned about 20 people. There's kind of sort of two studies. One was 16 people, I believe, one was 30 people. And we scanned them before and after the class. And what we found was that there was an increase in gray matter in several regions and a decrease in the amygdala. We'll start with the increases. So the main regions we found increased were the hippocampus, which is important for learning and memory. A region called the TPJ, which is important for empathy and perspective taking. And perspective taking means being able to see other people's point of view. And another region was a region called the posterior cingulate, and that's a region that's important for self-reference and seeing how things are related to you. And right, so those are the main regions that we found to be increased. And then we also found a decrease in the amygdala, and then that was interesting because the amygdala is important for processing fear and anxiety and stress, and it's known to increase as a result of stress in animals. And we found that the decrease was correlated with the decrease in stress. So the more people say they had decreased stress, the more the amygdala became less dense. And so we feel that was really important because, after these classes, a lot of research so far has just been self-report. People go through this 8-week class, they say they're less stressed, and people are like, well, it's just through the passage of time, or they want to feel better. But the fact that it's correlated with the change in the amygdala really suggests that there's a biological basis for their change in stress, and it's not just self-report, it's not just the passage of time, that there's a real reason why they're feeling less stressed.
Yeah, this is not just a placebo reporting of, well, I should feel better, I spent time in getting attention in this study that says I should.
Exactly.
Well, that's one of the things that I liked about this, and it was just looking at the abstract, is that you not only tested the 16 healthy, meditation naive, I like that phrase, meditation naive participants
Uh-huh. Yeah.
prior to get your baseline. And I think that was the component that was missing in the study prior to this, is you started with experienced people and said, what's going on in your brains? And you
Right.
saw, here's what their brains look like. But there's no trending. You didn't see any change over time to see what they would look like before. So you set your
Right.
baseline. You had a control group that remained meditation naive, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
And they went through the course, and then at the end of it, what you're seeing, the changes here, and I'm glad you brought up brain plasticity, because that's what I was thinking while you're describing this, is that you're seeing an increase in the density of the gray matter for areas that are the things that we have reported, and that we who are familiar with the effects of meditation, we feel better. We have a more stable sense of self. We're able to have that perspective, that level-headedness. And what this is doing is validating that this isn't just, as you're saying, self-reporting. This is actually, here's something where we can physically show what's going on here. And I thought it was very interesting because in the abstract, you didn't talk about the lessening of the density in the areas associated with fear in the brain. To me, that's really fascinating, because it shows that there is an actual reduction in stress that is biologically based, which is one of these discussions we have a great deal of, is consciousness and the brain when we're meditating and the self and all of that. What do we mean by consciousness, and what do we mean by stress, and how does that correlate to biological activities in the brain and body? That's what you're showing here.
Yeah. And then the thing that I thought was really interesting about the amygdala, it really is the perception of stress. There's, the animal studies, what they do with the animal studies is they take animals that are happy and healthy in a home cage, and they measure them. And then they stress out the animals. They put them in restraint, and they play loud noises and lots of light, which just stresses out the animals. And they do that for several days. And over those few days, their amygdala grows. But then if you put those animals back in their home cage, so there's no longer any stress, their amygdala remains large, and the animals behave in a stressed out way. And so even though their environment has changed, their relationship, they're still feeling stressed, they're still feeling, well, we don't know how they're feeling, but
right.
They
Yeah.
appear to be feeling stressed, and their amygdala mirrors their behavior. Whereas in our study with the humans, their environment's not changing. They still have their stressful jobs, they still have all the difficult people in their lives, but their relationship to their world has changed. And the amygdala is not responding to the external stressors, it's responding to your relationship to the stressors. And so that's, I think, again, very interesting.
Well, in particular with MBSR, one of the key objectives in that is you're concentrating on stress reduction, that you're taking a very active role in this. And one of the things that this study is showing is it isn't just a decision, it's a decision that is having tangible effects on your body, which that's a big deal.
Yeah.
This helps show that.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, MBSR is an amazing thing. I mean, it's, John's a genius for creating it, because it's so effective, and it's simple, and it's straightforward, and it's, people who would never dream of meditating in a million years are willing to do it. So I think it's really a fantastic program.
Mm-hmm. Now, so you had a number of partners in this study. There are a lot of names associated with this. What kinds of roles are played? Because many of us we're not professional scientists. I'm familiar with the scientific method, and a lot of us are part of the skeptic community, so we're very familiar with having controls and what valid studies are. What are some of the things that you did to have controls in this, in addition to having a control group, and some of the roles that your partners on this played?
So the first author on the paper is Britta Holzel, and she is my postdoctoral fellow. And she analyzed all the data. So she took all the data and actually analyzed it. A few of the people in the middle of the study were involved in collecting the data. They're research technicians, and they did a little bit of the analysis, but most of the analysis was done by Britta. And then the second author on the paper is Jim Carmody, who is a very important collaborator of ours. He works at UMass, which is where the Center for Mindfulness is located, and he was our liaison with the MBSR program. And we've been working together for many years, and he was interested in doing the study, and I was interested in doing the study, and we connected, and so he was really important, sort of for logistics, but also for theoretical, I guess, contributions. And he's just a wonderful guy.
Excellent. It's great having a liaison working with a separate group, because there is a kind of a necessary to have a somewhat of a separation between the people actually doing the studies and crunching the numbers and the test subjects in the study.
Exactly. Yep.
So one of the things that I mentioned before we started the interview is that the day that this article came out, I first saw it in Science News Daily. I had several emails from people from the website. I had someone post an article linking to it on the Facebook fan page for the podcast. I haven't gotten so much response about, have you seen this? In the time I've been doing the podcast. In fact, just yesterday, I had another old friend who has nothing to do with the podcast saying, hey, did you see this article about changes to the brain in 8 weeks with meditation? I said, yes, actually, I have.
Yeah.
And so on my side, of course, it's a great honor and privilege to have you here and talk with you about it, because this is something that clearly people are very, very interested in. But I understand it's also gotten a lot of attention outside of just this wee, tiny, small podcast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been floored and awed and amazed at the amount of attention it's gotten. The first study we did a couple years ago with the long-term practitioners versus controls, that had gotten a lot of media, but it took a while to sort of to percolate. Definitely it was in some high-profile articles and whatnot, but this has really taken off much more quickly and much more widely. So it was covered in a blog in the New York Times about a week ago, and on the second day it hit the number one most emailed articles, and it remained on the number one spot for 6 days. And yesterday, I guess it dropped down to number 2, and then after today's it's down to number 6. But it's just been, I was just amazed as that number 1 for so long. And that, just the fact that it was on that list, I had numerous people emailing me saying, oh my God, did you see it's on your number 1 on the list?
You're famous. This is great.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, just the fact that you even made it onto the list, I'm amazed. And then that it got to number 1 amazed me. And then the fact that it stayed on at the number 1 spot for a week was just, I'm amazed. And then I have a thing on my website which tracks where we're getting hits from, and since the article came out, we've gotten hits from 50 countries around the world. Like most of Asia has clicked on our website, and South America, Europe, basically most of the world except for Africa has clicked on our website. And there's a few places in Africa that have, but there's just been a ton of interest from everywhere in this study, which is very gratifying. It took a long time to get it published. Just the reviewers gave us a hard time about it. So it's really nice to see that there's so much interest in it.
Yeah. For people who are interested in reading the article itself, I did go out online, did find it. The link is really, really long, so I'll just tell people who are listening to this from iTunes, as I say almost every episode, go to the episode page for this episode. I've got a link to it right there. And interestingly enough, I'm very happy about this. It looks like the whole study is there with pictures and everything on the journal article, which is great. It's not one of those where you just get an abstract and then you got to pay $80 to subscribe to the journal. It's actually there for you to read. So please, folks listening to the podcast, do listen to that. Mm-hmm. One of the things I also wanted to ask you, Sara, is what's next? You've had this study which has gotten so much attention. Has there been any talk with you and your colleagues about what's the next study you'd like to do? Yeah.
So, and we're just starting it. It's, so the question is, what do these changes mean? And so we have this sense that the amygdala is involved in stress, but what about these other regions? And can we show that there's any other contribution other than reducing stress? Because certainly, as we said, there's a lot more to meditation than stress reduction. So, the study we're doing now is partly a replication and partly also an extension. So we're having people do an emotion regulation task. It's actually fear conditioning. You see a light, get shocked, yeah.
Oh, there's a movie in this one, I know.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very, very mild shock. It's not painful. It's just a very, sort of like a hand buzzer kind of shock. But and then we're seeing how their brains respond before and after MBSR. And, so that's a study we're just starting. And, I think we're in week 1 of the class. And, so it'll be a while before we get any results on that one. But then we would also like to, do some long-term follow-up studies. So, we saw some changes, but interestingly, the changes we saw pre-post MBSR were not exactly the same things we saw in the long-term practitioners. And so, as most people practice know, practice changes over time. After a while you say, oh, now I get it. And you practice a little bit differently. And oh, now I get it. And you practice a little bit differently. And so the question is, okay, well, is that happening? And is that why we see slightly different things now after 8 weeks than we did for long-term practitioners? So we would like to do a study where we test people before and after MBSR, but then again, at 6 months and a year later to sort of see, okay, is there change over time? And how is that relating to changes in behavior? So that's something, we're seeking to try to get funding for now, seeking funding for it.
Excellent. There's we've spoken with a few people who've done similar studies on the podcast before. Mm-hmm. And one in particular, on episode 23, there was a study on meditation effects on concentration with Catherine McLean. Mm-hmm. And in that episode, one of the effects that she had studied is what were the long-term effects, and that there were actual brain changes that study showed that had occurred over time with a regular meditation practice that wasn't 5 hours a day, but was just with a little bit, that there was good maintenance going forward. So I'm curious to see what your studies show as well. I think it would be wonderful to see if we can get you to come back on the podcast for that one. That would be wonderful. Love to have you.
Sure, yeah, it'll be a couple years from now, but yeah, that'd be great.
Excellent. I'll still be here. Uh-huh. We've been speaking with Dr. Sara Lazar of Massachusetts General Hospital, and this is for the Laboratory of Neuroscientific Investigation of Meditation. Sara, where can people find more information about the work that you're doing?
Well, we try to put everything on our website, and it's a long website.
Is this the Mass General one?
Yep. And so we have a publications page, and so everything's on there. And we also try to have links to news stories and press articles, press release articles, so that a little bit, so the public who are not scientists can understand what we're doing.
And we appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. So those are the main things. And we're working now on a review article that hopefully might be accessible, to some people to read.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm very glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the companion website at www.thesecularbuddhist.com, and you'll find an entire web page devoted to this and every episode. There are also links to discussions about today's topic on the Secular Buddhist Facebook fan page. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on The Secular Buddhist on the About Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.